Hook U15s. She had the Instagram, the morning routine, the 5 a.m. wake-ups, the revenue screenshots. She was doing everything right, and she was completely falling apart. Tension. 15 to 60s. Here's what nobody wants to say out loud. Hustle culture was never designed for women. It was built by men, for men, road-tested in environments that were designed around male bodies, male schedules, male social structures. And then it got repackaged, rebranded, sold to women as empowerment, as liberation, as the path to finally being taken seriously. But something quietly went wrong. And the women who followed that path the hardest are now the ones burning out the fastest and blaming themselves for it. Body. Let's start with something that might sting a little. When we talk about hustle culture, we usually talk about it like it's a neutral thing, like it's this universal set of rules that applies to everyone equally. Wake up early, work more, sleep less, sacrifice now, win later. And if you can't keep up, that's a you problem, a discipline problem, a mindset problem. But here's the thing. That framing was always a cover story. Hustle culture, at its core, was built on a very specific blueprint. The 1980s Wall Street archetype, the Silicon Valley founder myth. The idea that if you just grind long enough with no life outside of work, success is inevitable. And the people that blueprint was originally written for had something in common. They had wives. They had support systems invisible to the public. They had access to capital that didn't require proving themselves twice as hard to get half as far. Women entering that system didn't inherit the blueprint. They inherited the pressure without the infrastructure. Now think about what that actually looks like in practice. A woman founder is running her business. She's doing the thing. She's posting the content, building the audience, closing the clients. But she's also doing something the male founder statistics rarely account for. Studies consistently show women carry a disproportionate share of what researchers call cognitive labor. The mental load, the invisible management of households, relationships, family logistics. Work that doesn't show up on a productivity tracker. Work that doesn't count in hustle culture. But it costs energy the same way everything else does. So she's running 2 full-time operations, one visible, one completely invisible. And hustle culture is telling her to just add more. Here's the question nobody asks loudly enough. What happens to your ambition when the system you're ambitious inside was never meant to hold you? The 2026 NAMI workplace mental health data is hard to look at. Women reporting burnout at significantly higher rates than men. Women in leadership reporting anxiety at rates that would alarm anyone who looked closely. And this isn't a new trend. This has been building. What's new is how many women are now publicly stepping back from the hustle gospel they once preached and finding out they're not alone. But here's where it gets psychologically interesting. There's a concept in behavioral psychology called identity-based exhaustion. It's not just being tired. It's being tired in a way that threatens your sense of self. Because hustle culture doesn't just ask for your time. It asks you to make your productivity your identity, to tie your worth to your output, to feel guilty when you rest, to perform ambition even when your body is sending clear distress signals. And women, who have historically been told their worth is conditional, who have been socialized to constantly prove they deserve the space they occupy, are uniquely vulnerable to that identity trap. So when burnout hits, it doesn't just feel like exhaustion. It feels like failure. Like maybe you just weren't built for this. Like maybe the critics were right all along. That psychological spiral, that's not a personal weakness. That's a designed outcome of a system that benefits from keeping people too exhausted and too self-blaming to look at the structural problems clearly. Let me give you a specific example of how this plays out. Investment data from the last several years tells a consistent story. Women-led startups receive a fraction of venture capital funding compared to male-led startups. The exact numbers shift year to year, but the gap has never closed meaningfully. What that means in practice is that women founders often have to work longer, prove more, bootstrap harder, and sustain more personal financial risk just to reach a starting line that men often begin ahead of. And then hustle culture comes in and says the answer is just to work harder. More content, more visibility, more sacrifice, more grind. But here's what that actually does over time. It doesn't level the playing field. It just normalizes an unequal one. It convinces talented, capable people that structural inequality is a personal discipline problem. And that belief, that quiet internalized belief, might be one of the most expensive psychological traps in modern work culture. Climax. Here's the central thing. Hustle culture isn't failing women because women can't hustle. It's failing women because hustle culture was always a myth, and women are now close enough to the promised destination to see that nothing is actually waiting there. The men who built the hustle gospel often had exits, IPOs, acquisitions, generational wealth that got quietly passed along. They wrote books about grinding and neglected to mention the luck, the capital access, the social networks, the structural advantages that made the grinding work. And women who followed that gospel, who believed that working twice as hard would close a gap that was never just about effort, are arriving at their 5th year of 60-hour weeks and finding out the math never added up. That moment of realization, the one where you see the system clearly for the first time, is one of the most disorienting psychological experiences in modern professional life. Because you don't just lose faith in hustle culture. You have to grieve the version of yourself that believed in it. Ending. So what do you do with that? You don't go back. You don't pretend the realization didn't happen. You start making decisions from a place of clarity instead of conditioning. You ask different questions. Not, how do I work harder, but what system am I working inside, and is it actually designed for me to win? The most radical thing a woman in 2026 can do isn't hustle harder. It's audit the game she's been told to play, and then decide with full information whether she wants to keep playing it on someone else's terms, or build something that was designed with her in mind from the start. Hustle culture sold a generation of women a very expensive lie. The ones who are walking away aren't giving up. They're waking up. And that's a different thing entirely.